Back Internet, the Psychologist's Casual Review, and today we're going to be reviewing the book The Psychopath by Quentin Debray, which is a psychiatrist that, to my knowledge, is still working. He's in his late 70s, early 80s, I don't know, but at least he's still alive and he's still active from what I know. So I felt that it was interesting and important to talk about this book, because this book is not a compilation of seedy stories, nor is it written for sensationalist purposes, but it's written in order to try and attempt to gather all the understanding of what we classify as psychopathy. So even though he talks about the psychopath, I'm going to use another word as I feel it's more contemporary, and he even uses it once, but he doesn't use it systematically, which is antisocial personality disorders. So I'll be using that as well. So what I found very interesting with the book is that basically it's a rigorous attempt to try and understand the mentality of psychopaths, which is, I think, a brilliant endeavor, because there's so many preconceived ideas, cliches, and problems linked with the word itself of psychopath or antisocial personality disorder. Cliches that are, I think, very harmful, most notably that they're violent killers, people that would kill for any reason regardless, people that are just completely void of emotions. And I think this book is pretty good and pretty accurate in what it tries to present. It presents them as people that are not necessarily going to kill or hurt others, but are just fundamentally uncaring in the real sense of the word, meaning that they don't have empathy towards others, they don't really care about others, they care only for their well-being, and even their well-being is very, very unstable. And that's, I think, the main core of this book, is to show the instability of the psychopath, meaning that emotionally there's happiness, sadness, contempt, and so many other emotions, but the person doesn't know how to deal with them. They have to be ejected in a way. They have to be forced out or forced upon others because the person can't deal with them, so he's just going to expel. And the problem is that impulsivity, it's going to lead to massive problems with relationships, of course, but also with the law, society, and everything in general. So the psychopath is in a way also a victim of his own behavior, meaning that he can't control what is let out. It's just there and it's just massive. And what is interesting, the book goes into detail on where are the most psychopaths, and it seems that in terms of urbanism, in big cities there's more psychopathy than in rural villages, perhaps because people are not in touch in the same way. Even though he doesn't go really into big details about that, it is interesting to note. He also, in a very interesting manner, notes that basically those people also can't take care of others, meaning that they are very immature when it comes to, for example, parenting. Often they abandon their children, or they don't even understand that their children have needs. They don't understand that others have emotional, physical, and even biological needs. They just are detached from that, like ununderstanding of it. And strangely enough, and that's what I took out of the book, is that it's not that they are sadistic about others, it's just that there is a fundamental detachment, not unlike a schizoid detachment, but more in depth and more profound than that, as schizoid people do care about others in a way, but they just are frightened by the relationship, whereas the psychopath doesn't really care. And that's the interesting point, is that basically they're unstable, uncaring, and unfortunately that's a combo within our culture that leads to massive problems, as it is expected from an individual to be able to control their emotions, or at least frame them in a certain way, which those people can't do. So what is there to help? Well, at least in the 80s, when the book was written, there was no medication, and from my knowledge, there is no medication per se even for antisocial personality disorder. There might be medication for depression, but the question is, how do we help them? And the answer is psychotherapy, but even that it has to be very attempted in a very subtle way and not expected to wield massive results. It's going to be more about introspection, but even for them, for the psychopaths, it's complicated. Looking inwards is terribly complicated, as they have an internal void, meaning that you're gonna run into problems very, very quickly. So in a way, psychoanalysis is completely off the table, but even psychodynamics can be more complicated. Perhaps the naming of emotions, the recognitions of emotions, of the emotions of the self and the emotions of others, is one way to go. There's also another very interesting fact in the book, is to say that the psychopaths tend to be easy contact, not easygoing necessarily, but easy within the relationships. But being charismatic is a characteristic of them. But that charisma doesn't really maintain in time. It breaks as soon as there's a mishap, or there's something that makes the person who has psychopathy problematic. Once they feel that you've hurt their image, their grandiose image, that's going to be the moment where it's going to snap, and that's where the impulsiveness can come through. And that I find very interesting. And he also said that they're not necessarily going to commit murders. That's not the de facto idea you should have of psychopaths. The de facto idea of them, and the real clinical idea of them, is that they're people who are immature, unable to take care of themselves or others, but who are charming, who can seduce. But there's not going to be nothing after that in the relationship. It's not going to be built. It's going to stay stagnant in a way, and they're not going to be able to go beyond that simple charminess of the first, let's say, couple of interactions. And that's, I think, the taken away point, is that those people, because of their mental disorders and because of their suffering, are not able to extend towards others, and when they do, they don't care about others and they don't see others. In a way, they're stuck within their own mental frame, within their own suffering, within their own impulsiveness. And that suffering is not going to be necessarily something that they're going to be in touch with. They're not going to necessarily feel that they're suffering about it. But that doesn't mean they're not. And I think that it's complicated because they're not well suited for psychotherapy, but there's little else that can truly help. But that's something that's still going to be, I think, problematic throughout the years to come, that we haven't found something that really, truly, fundamentally works. And that, I think, is one of the main points of the books, is that we're trying as a society to help them, but it's going to be complicated. And there's still a lot of hurdles on that road, should I say. Another thing that you should be aware if you're interested in the book, it's that it's a book that's quite old. It's been published in the 80s, so it doesn't have 40 years, but we're not quite far from that. So things might not be quite up to standards, but I think that the reflection, the thinking of Quentin Debray is still very valuable. He's still a good author. He still makes it interesting enough for you to persevere with this short book and to have something stuck in your mind. For example, that idea of immaturity and psychopathy has stuck with me for over 10 years. So basically, it says something when the main point of your book was still understood, and that how I could pass from the stereotypical idea to a more elaborate and subtle idea of psychopathy thanks to this book. And another plus, if you're like me and you have trouble reading, or reading is not something you do quickly, this book is really super short. Like you can see, it's not, I think it's like, yeah, here we go. It's 77 pages, so less than 100 pages, and you get good data and good science and good thinking in it. So I would recommend this book if you're interested in psychopathy, but not in that seedy side of it, but in that true, genuine and scientific approach. Anyway, I hope you liked the review, and I'll see you in the next one.